Marriage is that joyous experiment in mutual disappointment, where two people promise to love each other until one of them discovers that love apparently has an expiration date. I'm Darren Halloway, 38 years old, and I've just learned that my wife's love came with a Best Buy stamp I never noticed. Ember Carrow, yes, she kept her maiden name, which should have been my first clue, returned to our downtown condo after what she euphemistically called a break. 3 months of separation, during which I assumed she was finding herself. Turns out, she was finding her boss instead. "I made a terrible mistake," she announced, standing in our living room like she was delivering a quarterly report. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, her business suit wrinkle-free. Even her contrition looked professionally managed. I set down my coffee mug and studied her face. Ember had always been beautiful in that calculated way that screams ambition. Sharp cheekbones, green eyes that could cut glass, and a smile that had probably closed more deals than her actual business acumen. At 35, she was the HR director at Gresham Industries, a position she'd clawed her way into with the determination of a woman who viewed life as a ladder to climb. "Not a mistake," I replied calmly, watching her expression shift. "My opportunity." Her face twisted with something between confusion and rage. "What's that supposed to mean?" I gestured toward the dining table. "Sit down. I need to finish a call first." She hesitated, probably expecting tears or shouting or some dramatic scene worthy of her soap opera sensibilities. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed my attorney's number. "Jim, it's Darren. Yes, I'm ready to proceed. Send everything we discussed." While I spoke, I opened a manila folder that had been sitting on the table for 3 days, waiting for this moment. Inside were calendar exports, expense approvals, and badge access logs that told a story more compelling than any romance novel. Late-night meetings at the Meridian Hotel. Dinner receipts for 2 at restaurants I'd never been to. Security swipes showing Ember entering Victor Gresham's private office at 10 p.m. on multiple occasions. My son Danny had helped me compile some of the digital evidence. At 14, he was already more tech-savvy than most adults, and he'd inherited my talent for logical thinking. He also had his mother's sharp tongue, though he used it with more precision than malice. "Dad, you know she's been lying, right?" he'd said last week, not looking up from his laptop. "Her Instagram location tags don't match her calendar." Smart kid. He'd figured out what I'd suspected months before the separation. I ended the call and looked at Ember, who was now sitting rigidly in her chair. Her hands were clasped in her lap, knuckles white with tension. "I forwarded a packet to my attorney and scheduled a compliance review under your company's ethics policy," I said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "Darren, please, I'm not finished." I opened the folder and spread the contents across the table like playing cards. Hotel invoices, joint charges on Victor's corporate credit card, and this interesting lease addendum you signed during our separation. Her face went pale. The lease addendum was for a furnished apartment downtown, co-signed by Victor Gresham himself. Apparently, love required a backup plan. "You can't do this," she whispered. "Actually, I can, and I have." I stood up and walked to the kitchen, retrieving a bottle of wine from the refrigerator. "I invited someone to join us. I thought you might want to explain yourself to her personally." "Her?" The front door opened, and Laura Gresham walked in. Victor's wife was everything Ember pretended to be, genuinely elegant, quietly powerful, and smart enough to have married money while keeping her own career as a federal prosecutor. She was also, as I discovered, completely aware of her husband's wandering eye and thoroughly tired of his indiscretions. Laura nodded to me and took a seat across from Ember. She picked up the hotel invoices and examined them with the clinical detachment of someone reviewing evidence. "The Meridian Hotel," Laura said quietly. "Victor charged 17 visits there in the past 3 months. Always the same room, always the same time." She looked up at Ember. Did you enjoy the champagne? He has such predictable tastes. Ember's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. This wasn't going according to whatever script she'd prepared. I can explain, Ember started. Please don't, Laura interrupted. I've heard enough explanations from enough women to last several lifetimes. What I need are signatures. She produced a document from her purse and placed it on the table. It was a sworn affidavit, detailing the affair with dates, locations, and financial evidence. At the bottom were signature lines for witness testimony. Sign this, and I'll make sure your termination from Gresham Industries is quiet. Refuse, and I'll ensure the ethics review becomes very public, very messy, and very permanent for your career. I poured 3 glasses of wine, though I suspected only I would be drinking. This was turning out better than I'd hoped. Laura had contacted me 2 weeks ago, after her private investigator had photographed Ember and Victor together. Apparently, I wasn't the only spouse who'd grown tired of being taken for granted. You planned this, Ember said, staring at me with something approaching respect. You orchestrated this whole thing. I prefer to think of it as quality management, I replied. You made choices. I'm simply ensuring those choices have appropriate consequences. Laura stood up, tucking the signed affidavit into her purse. The ethics review will conclude that both you and Victor violated company policy regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates. Victor will be terminated with cause, forfeiting his severance package. You'll be terminated for cause as well, though your severance was considerably smaller anyway. She paused at the door and looked back at Ember. Oh, and Victor won't be available to console you through this difficult time. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning, and my attorneys are significantly more ruthless than Darren's. After Laura left, Ember and I sat in silence for several minutes. She stared at the wine glass in front of her, and I studied her face, trying to remember when I'd stopped loving her and started planning her downfall. How long have you known? She finally asked. About Victor? Since February. About you in general? Probably since Danny was born and you started treating our family like a side project. She flinched at that. Ember had always been ambitious, but motherhood had turned her ambition into something colder. She loved Danny in her way, but she loved her career more, and she'd never bothered hiding it. What happens now? I slid a manila envelope across the table. Divorce papers. I'm filing tomorrow. I'm asking for primary custody of Danny, the condo, and half of everything else. Given the circumstances, I suspect you'll find my terms reasonable. And if I fight you? I smiled for the first time all evening. Then I'll make Laura Gresham look like an amateur. I have 4 months of evidence, Ember. Phone records, credit card statements, witness testimony from hotel staff, and a very detailed timeline of your relationship with Victor. I also have screenshots of text messages that would make your mother disown you. That last part was a bluff, but Ember didn't know that. Her mother, Patricia Carrow, was a devout Catholic who'd already expressed concerns about Ember's modern values. Learning about the affair would probably trigger a family crisis that would make our divorce look like a minor disagreement. Ember picked up the divorce papers and flipped through them. You want the condo? I want stability for Danny. This is his home. And you think you can raise him alone? I laughed, genuinely amused. Ember, I've been raising him alone for years. You've been too busy climbing the corporate ladder to notice. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I won't sign this tonight. I need time to think. Take all the time you need, but remember, every day you delay is another day. The ethics review gathers momentum. Laura's attorneys are very thorough, and they're very motivated. After she left, I poured myself another glass of wine and called Danny's room. You can come out now. He emerged from his bedroom, laptop in hand. Did you record it? Every word. Legal in this state, as long as one party consents. Mom looked like someone had stolen her credit card. Your mother just learned that actions have consequences. It's a valuable lesson she should have learned years ago. Danny sat down across from me and opened his laptop. I finished that project you asked about. On the screen was a comprehensive social media analysis showing Ember's location data, tagged photos, and check-ins for the past 6 months. Every lie was documented, every inconsistency highlighted. My son had built a digital timeline that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. "Good work," I said. "Though I hope you never need these skills for personal reasons." "Dad, are you going to destroy her?" I considered the question carefully. Danny deserved an honest answer, but he was still 14, still trying to understand why his family was falling apart. "I'm going to hold her accountable," I said finally. "There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Destroying someone means you want to hurt them. Holding them accountable means you want them to face the natural consequences of their choices." "And Victor?" "Victor made the mistake of thinking he was untouchable. Laura's going to teach him otherwise." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, father and son, planning the careful dismantling of the life Ember had tried to build on lies and betrayal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: control. The opportunity was just beginning. Morning arrived with the subtle cruelty of a hangover, though I'd only had 2 glasses of wine. Ember had texted at 6 a.m., asking for a truth dinner at home. She probably thought it was reconciliation. I thought of it as the opening ceremony for her professional funeral. I spent the day at my office, managing IT systems for a mid-sized consulting firm. My job involved keeping other people's digital lives organized, which had given me a unique appreciation for the importance of documentation. Every email, every login, every digital footprint told a story. Ember's story was particularly illuminating. My colleague Jules Martinez stopped by my desk around lunch. Jules was one of those people who thrived on workplace drama, which made him an excellent source of information and an even better ally in times of crisis. "You look like someone who's planning something devious," he observed, settling into the chair beside my desk. "I prefer the term strategic," I replied, not looking up from my computer screen. "Ember drama?" Jules was one of the few people who knew about the separation. He'd also been the one to suggest hiring a private investigator, though that had turned out to be unnecessary. Ember and Victor had been careless enough to document their affair themselves. Ember and Victor drama. It turns out adultery leaves a very detailed paper trail when you use corporate credit cards. Jules whistled low. "Victor Gresham? The CEO, Victor Gresham?" "The very same. Apparently, my wife has expensive tastes in everything, including her extramarital affairs." "What's the plan?" I turned my monitor toward him, showing a spreadsheet that detailed every expense, every hotel visit, every dinner that had been charged to Gresham Industries during Ember's affair. The total was impressive: nearly 30,000 in company funds used to facilitate a relationship that violated at least 6 different corporate policies. Corporate compliance review, ethics investigation, and a very public divorce. Laura Gresham is handling the corporate side, and I'm handling the personal side. Laura knows. Laura orchestrated it. Turns out Victor has a pattern of using company resources for personal relationships. She's been building a case for months. Jules leaned back in his chair, grinning. "I love it when a plan comes together. What do you need from me?" "Nothing illegal. But if you happen to know anyone in the media who might be interested in a story about corporate executives using company funds for personal affairs, I might know someone, hypothetically. Hypothetically, that would be very helpful." The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine tasks and strategic planning. I left the office early to prepare for dinner, stopping at the grocery store to buy ingredients for Ember's favorite meal. If this was going to be our last supper as a married couple, I wanted it to be memorable. Danny was at his friend Marcus's house, which was perfect timing. This conversation needed to happen without an audience, at least initially. I was setting the table when Ember arrived. She'd changed from her business attire into a dress I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. She was trying to remind me of better times, happier moments, the woman I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. "Something smells good," she said, hanging her coat in the closet. "Herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables. Your favorite." She smiled, and for a moment I could see the woman I'd married. Before the ambition consumed her, before the lies became routine, before she decided that our family was something to be managed rather than cherished. We ate in relative silence, making small talk about Danny's school and my work. Ember seemed nervous, fidgeting with her napkin and avoiding eye contact. She was waiting for me to bring up the divorce papers, probably planning her counter-argument. "The salmon is perfect," she said finally. "Thank you. I had time to practice while you were finding yourself." She winced at that. "Darren, about yesterday. Let's save the conversation for dessert. I made tiramisu." Her favorite dessert. I was really pulling out all the stops for this performance. After dinner, I cleared the table and returned with the tiramisu and a bottle of champagne. Ember's eyes lit up when she saw the champagne, Dom Perignon, the same brand she'd been drinking at the Meridian Hotel with Victor. "Are we celebrating something?" she asked. "In a way." I poured 2 glasses and sat down across from her. "I want to thank you for yesterday, for being honest about Victor, about the affair, about everything." She looked confused but hopeful. "Does that mean you're willing to work through this?" "It means I'm willing to give you what you really want." I reached under the table and retrieved another manila folder, this one significantly thicker than yesterday's. I placed it on the table between us, next to the tiramisu. "What is that?" "Your freedom. Complete documentation of your relationship with Victor, organized chronologically and cross-referenced with corporate policies and state adultery laws. Everything you need to make a clean break from our marriage and start fresh." She stared at the folder like it might explode. "I don't understand." "You want Victor. You want the excitement, the corporate power games, the hotel rooms, and the expensive dinners. You want a life that doesn't include school plays and soccer practice and family dinners. I'm giving you permission to have that life." "But Victor's married?" "Not for long. Laura filed for divorce this morning. She's also pressing charges for embezzlement, citing the corporate funds used to facilitate your affair. Victor's going to need all the support he can get." Ember's face went pale. Embezzlement? But those were just dinners and hotels. 30,000 in company funds used for personal relationships that violated corporate policy. Laura's attorneys are calling it theft of corporate assets. The district attorney's office is very interested. I opened the folder and spread some of the contents across the table. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, restaurant bills, all highlighted and annotated. The paper trail was damning and comprehensive. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I'm not doing anything. I'm simply documenting what you already did. The choices were yours, Ember. I'm just ensuring they have appropriate consequences." She stood up abruptly, knocking over her champagne glass. The golden liquid spread across the table, soaking into the papers. "This is blackmail. This is accountability. There's a difference. What do you want?" "I want you to sign the divorce papers. I want primary custody of Danny. I want you to take responsibility for your choices instead of expecting me to pretend they didn't happen." "And if I refuse?" I smiled and reached for my phone. "Then I make a call, and this entire folder gets delivered to the ethics committee, the district attorney's office, and the local media. Your affair becomes a public scandal, Victor goes to prison, and you become unemployable in this city." She sank back into her chair, staring at the champagne-soaked papers. "You've changed." "No, I've adapted. For 15 years, I enabled your behavior by cleaning up your messes and making excuses for your choices. I'm done being your safety net." The front door opened, and Danny walked in, earlier than expected from his friend's house. He took one look at the scene, the scattered papers, the overturned champagne glass, his mother's tear-streaked face, and understood immediately. "Hey, Dad, how'd the conversation go?" Ember stared at him in shock. "You knew about this?" "I helped research it," Danny replied calmly. "Turns out digital forensics is pretty straightforward when people don't bother covering their tracks." "Your own son. My son who's been watching his mother lie to his father for months," I interrupted. "My son who deserves honesty and stability instead of drama and manipulation." Danny sat down at the table and looked at his mother with the kind of directness that only teenagers can manage. "Mom, why did you think we wouldn't figure it out? You used the same passwords for everything, your location services were turned on, and you kept all your receipts in your email." Ember looked between us, realizing that she was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. "This is insane. You're both insane." "We're both tired of being lied to," I corrected. "Sign the papers, Ember. Take your freedom and go build the life you actually want." She picked up the divorce papers with shaking hands. "What about Danny? What about him? He's my son too." "Then act like it. Be the mother he deserves, even if you can't be the wife I needed." She signed the papers with sharp, angry strokes, then threw the pen across the table. "I hope you're happy." "I'm not happy, but I'm free. And so are you." After she left, Danny and I cleaned up the champagne and put the papers away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: custody arrangements, property division, the complex logistics of dismantling a 15-year marriage. But tonight, for the first time in months, our home felt peaceful. "Dad, are you okay?" I looked at my son, this remarkable young man who'd helped me navigate the most difficult period of my life with wisdom and loyalty that humbled me. "I'm better than okay. I'm proud of us." "For what?" "For choosing truth over comfort. For choosing accountability over enabling. For choosing each other." The opportunity was becoming something larger than revenge. It was becoming justice. The next morning brought the kind of crisp autumn air that makes you believe in fresh starts and new beginnings. Unfortunately for Victor Gresham, it also brought a team of corporate attorneys, a compliance investigation, and the beginning of what would become a very public downfall. I was in my office, reviewing system logs and pretending to work, when Jules appeared at my desk with a cup of coffee and a grin that could power a small city. "Have you seen the news?" he asked, setting down his laptop. The local business journal's website displayed a headline that made my morning: "Gresham Industries CEO under investigation for corporate policy violations." The article was carefully worded, avoiding specific allegations while making it clear that Victor's career was in serious jeopardy. "Laura works fast," I observed. "Laura has excellent attorneys, and apparently, Victor has excellent timing for self-destruction." The article detailed how the compliance review had uncovered a pattern of policy violations dating back several years. Ember's affair was just the latest in a series of relationships that had cost the company significant money and created liability issues. Victor's board of directors was reportedly reviewing his continued employment. My phone buzzed with a text from Laura. "Phase 2 begins today. Are you ready?" I texted back, "Ready." Phase 2 involved something Laura called social pressure. While the legal and corporate machinery ground through its processes, we would ensure that Victor and Ember faced immediate social consequences for their choices. Laura had connections throughout the city's professional and social circles, and she intended to use them. I left work early and drove to Danny's school. Parent-teacher conferences were scheduled for the afternoon, and I wanted to ensure that our family's situation was handled with dignity and discretion. Danny's teachers needed to know about the divorce without getting drawn into the drama. The school parking lot was filled with luxury cars and harried parents juggling work calls and family obligations. I recognized several faces from school events and neighborhood gatherings, the kind of people who formed the backbone of our community's social fabric. Inside, I found Danny waiting by his locker, backpack slung over one shoulder. At 14, he was already taller than his mother and showing signs of the man he would become. He had Ember's sharp intelligence, but my tendency toward careful planning. "How was school?" I asked. "Weird. Mom called the office and tried to change my emergency contact information. They told her she needed written permission from both parents." I felt a surge of anger at Ember's presumption, followed by satisfaction that the school's policies were protecting my interests. "What did you tell them?" "That I wanted to stay with you. Mrs. Henderson said she'd make a note in my file." We walked toward the conference rooms together, father and son presenting a united front. Several parents nodded hello, and I wondered how many of them had already heard rumors about our situation. In a community this size, news traveled fast, especially scandalous news involving prominent families. Danny's English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was a woman in her 50s who'd been teaching long enough to recognize family crisis when she saw it. She reviewed Danny's grades, all A's and B's, and praised his recent essay on personal integrity. "He wrote about the importance of honesty in relationships," she said, glancing between us. "Very mature perspective for someone his age." "He's had some recent experience with the topic," I replied. After the conferences, Danny and I stopped for dinner at his favorite burger place. The restaurant was crowded with families, couples, and teenagers, all of them living their normal lives without the complications of affairs and divorce proceedings. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you going to try to destroy Mom completely, or just make her face consequences?" It was a sophisticated question that deserved a thoughtful answer. "What's the difference, in your opinion? Destroying her would mean trying to hurt her just because you're angry. Making her face consequences means letting her choices create natural results. And what do you think I'm doing?" He considered this while eating his fries. "I think you're doing consequences, but you're enjoying it more than you probably should." "Smart kid. Too smart, maybe." "You're right. I am enjoying it. Does that bother you?" "Not really. She hurt you, and she hurt our family. I think she should have to deal with that. But I don't want you to become someone mean just because she was selfish." "I'll try to remember that." We were finishing dinner when my phone rang. Laura's name appeared on the screen, and I answered immediately. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Victor's trying to pin everything on Ember. He's claiming she seduced him and used the company resources without his knowledge." "Can he do that?" "He can try, but I have evidence that suggests otherwise. Can you meet me at my attorney's office in an hour?" I looked at Danny, who was listening to my side of the conversation with obvious interest. "I'll be there." Laura's attorney, Michael Chen, had offices in one of the downtown high-rises that dominated the city skyline. His conference room overlooked the financial district, and I could see Gresham Industries building from the window. The irony wasn't lost on me. Laura was already there when I arrived, along with Chen and another woman I didn't recognize. They had documents spread across the conference table like battle plans. "Darren, this is Jennifer Walsh from the district attorney's office," Laura said. "She's handling the criminal investigation." Jennifer was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 30s, with the kind of focused intensity that suggested she didn't lose cases often. She shook my hand and gestured toward the table. "We need to discuss Victor's defense strategy," she said. "He's claiming that Ember initiated the relationship and manipulated him into using company resources. He's painting himself as the victim." I laughed, genuinely amused. Victor Gresham, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, claims he was manipulated by an HR director? That's his defense? "It's not uncommon," Chen said. "Powerful men often claim they were seduced when their affairs become public. It shifts blame to the woman and plays into certain stereotypes about female manipulation." "What evidence do you have that contradicts his story?" Laura opened a folder and pulled out a series of photographs. They showed Victor and Ember together at various restaurants and hotels, but more importantly, they showed Victor's body language. In every image, he was the one initiating contact, his hand on her back, his arm around her waist, his body positioned protectively around hers. "These were taken by my private investigator over the past 2 months," Laura said. "They tell a very different story than Victor's claims of manipulation." Jennifer added another set of documents to the table. "We also have email evidence showing Victor initiated most of their meetings and personally approved the expense reports that covered their activities." I studied the emails, recognizing Ember's writing style in her responses. She was flirtatious and encouraging, but Victor was clearly the pursuer. His messages were more explicit, more demanding, more indicative of someone in control of the situation. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Testimony about Ember's state of mind during the affair," Jennifer said. "Was she acting like someone who was manipulating a powerful man, or was she acting like someone who was being pursued by her boss?" I thought about the months leading up to our separation. Ember had been anxious, secretive, and defensive, not the behavior of someone orchestrating a seduction. She'd seemed more like someone who was in over her head, caught between her marriage and her career ambitions. "She was scared," I said finally. "She was lying to me, but she was also scared of being caught. That's not the behavior of someone who's in control of the situation." "That's helpful," Jennifer said. "We'll need a formal statement, but this gives us a direction for our investigation." After the meeting, Laura and I walked to the parking garage together. The city lights were beginning to flicker on, and the evening air carried the promise of rain. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Better than I expected. How about you?" "I'm angry, but I'm also relieved. Victor's been having affairs for years, and I've been pretending not to notice. This is my chance to stop pretending." We reached our cars, parked side by side in the underground garage. Laura's Mercedes was spotless and expensive, the kind of car that announced success without apology. "Darren, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Do you still love her? Ember, I mean." I considered the question carefully. A month ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. But now, after weeks of lies and revelations and strategic planning, I wasn't sure what I felt anymore. "I love who she used to be," I said finally. "But that person might not exist anymore. I understand that. I've been mourning the loss of who Victor used to be for years." We said goodbye, and I drove home through the quiet streets of our neighborhood. The houses were lit from within, families gathered around dinner tables and television screens, living their uncomplicated lives. Danny was in his room when I arrived, working on homework with the methodical focus he'd inherited from me. I knocked on his door and found him surrounded by textbooks and notebooks, his laptop open to a research page about corporate ethics. "School project?" I asked. "Extra credit for social studies. I'm writing about the relationship between personal ethics and professional responsibility." "Inspired by recent events?" "Maybe. Is it okay if I interview you for the project?" I sat down on his bed and looked at my son, this remarkable young man who was turning our family crisis into a learning opportunity. "What do you want to know?" "Do you think people can change? Like really change, not just pretend to change?" It was the kind of question that philosophers had been debating for centuries, and my 14-year-old son was asking it with the earnestness of someone who genuinely wanted to understand. "I think people can change if they want to badly enough," I said. "But they have to want it for the right reasons, and they have to be willing to do the work. Do you think Mom wants to change?" "I think your mother wants the consequences of her choices to go away. That's different from wanting to change." He nodded and made a note in his notebook. "One more question. Are you proud of how you're handling this?" I thought about the question seriously. Was I proud of the strategic planning, the careful documentation, the methodical destruction of Ember's carefully constructed lies? Was I proud of the satisfaction I felt when her world began to crumble? "I'm proud that I'm not letting myself be a victim," I said finally. "I'm proud that I'm teaching you that actions have consequences, but I'm not proud of how much I'm enjoying watching her suffer." That's honest. Honesty seems to be in short supply lately. I'm trying to model better behavior. The next morning brought news that Victor had been terminated from Gresham Industries, effective immediately. The board of directors had voted unanimously to remove him, citing violations of corporate policy and potential criminal liability. His severance package had been revoked, and the company was cooperating fully with the district attorney's investigation. Ember's termination followed 2 hours later. The opportunity had become something larger than personal revenge. It had become a reckoning that would reshape multiple lives and careers. And we were just getting started. The thing about small communities is that scandal spreads like spilled wine on white carpet, fast, far, and impossible to clean up completely. By Thursday morning, everyone in our neighborhood knew that Victor Gresham and Ember Carrow had been terminated from their positions at Gresham Industries. By Thursday afternoon, everyone knew why. I was working from home when the first call came. Margaret Peterson, president of the Parent-Teacher Association and unofficial guardian of neighborhood morality, wanted to express her concern about recent developments. "Darren, I hope you know that the entire community supports you during this difficult time," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of sympathy that barely concealed gossip-hungry curiosity. "Thank you, Margaret. Danny and I appreciate the support." Of course, we'll need to discuss Ember's continued involvement in the spring fundraiser committee. Given the circumstances, some parents have expressed concerns about her representing our school. Translation: Ember had been voted off the island by the suburban parent mafia. In our community, being excluded from volunteer activities was social execution. "I understand completely," I said. "Danny and I will continue to support the school's activities." "Wonderful. And Darren, if you need anything, meals, babysitting, someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to call." After Margaret hung up, I poured myself a cup of coffee and considered the morning's developments. The social machinery was grinding into action, and Ember was about to discover that professional consequences were just the beginning of her problems. My phone buzzed with a text from Jules. "Check the neighborhood Facebook group, drama incoming." I opened the app and found a post from Lisa Chen, our next-door neighbor and mother of 3. The post was carefully worded but devastating in its implications. "Ladies, I wanted to share some important information about recent events in our community. As many of you know, there have been some significant changes in the Halloway family situation. While I respect everyone's privacy, I think it's important that we support families who are dealing with the consequences of others' poor choices. Darren and Danny are wonderful neighbors who deserve our compassion and assistance during this transition." The comments section was already filling up with responses. Offers of casseroles and babysitting for Danny, expressions of support for me, and carefully worded condemnations of Ember's behavior that managed to sound sympathetic while being utterly damning. Such a shame when people forget what's really important. Some people just don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. I always thought Darren was too good for her. Poor Danny. Thank goodness he has such a stable father. The suburban parent network was executing Ember with the precision of a military operation. She was being erased from the community one Facebook comment at a time. Danny emerged from his room around noon, laptop in hand. He'd been working on his social studies project, and his research had expanded beyond corporate ethics into the realm of social consequences for moral failures. "Dad, have you seen Mom's Instagram?" I hadn't, but Danny showed me on his laptop. Ember's last post was from 3 days ago, a professional headshot with the caption, "Excited about new opportunities and fresh starts." The comments section told a different story. Friends and colleagues had stopped liking her posts, and the few comments that remained were either obviously fake supportive or subtly critical. "She's losing her social media presence," Danny observed. "People are unfollowing her, untagging themselves from old photos, removing her from group conversations. It's like digital shunning." "How do you know all this?" "I may have created a fake account to monitor the situation, for research purposes. I should have been concerned about my son's developing surveillance skills, but I was mostly impressed by his thoroughness. What else have you discovered? Victor's wife isn't just divorcing him. She's destroying him systematically. She's contacted his golf club, his gym, his professional associations. She's making sure everyone knows exactly why their marriage ended. Danny showed me a series of screenshots from various social media platforms. Laura Gresham had posted a single devastating statement on her Facebook page. After 15 years of marriage, I have decided to divorce my husband due to his repeated infidelity and misuse of corporate resources to facilitate extramarital relationships. I want to thank everyone who has supported me during this difficult time, and I look forward to moving forward with dignity and honesty. The post had been shared hundreds of times and had generated thousands of comments. Laura's friends and professional colleagues were rallying around her, while Victor was being systematically excluded from the social circles he'd once dominated. "She's good at this," I said, genuinely impressed. "She's had practice. According to my research, Victor's been cheating for years. She's been planning this for a long time." The doorbell rang, interrupting our analysis. I opened it to find Tom Bradley, our neighbor from across the street, holding a casserole dish and wearing the expression of someone delivering condolences. "Hey Darren, Sarah made extra lasagna, and we thought you and Danny might appreciate a home-cooked meal." Tom was a good man, an accountant with 3 kids and a wife who organized neighborhood potlucks. He was also the kind of person who believed in traditional values like marriage, fidelity, and personal responsibility. "That's very kind. Please thank Sarah for us." "Of course. And Darren, if you need anything, help with yard work, someone to watch Danny, whatever, just let us know." What Ember did, it's not right. A man should be able to trust his wife. After Tom left, Danny and I ate Sarah's lasagna and discussed the day's developments. The neighborhood response was swift and decisive. I was being embraced as the wronged party, while Ember was being quietly but thoroughly ostracized. "Is this what you wanted?" Danny asked. "I wanted accountability. This is what accountability looks like in a community that values marriage and family." "But is it fair? I mean, Mom made mistakes, but does she deserve to lose everything?" It was a thoughtful question that deserved a careful answer. Fair is a complicated concept, Danny. Your mother made choices that hurt our family and violated her professional responsibilities. These are the natural consequences of those choices. But you helped make sure the consequences happened. I documented what she did and made sure the right people knew about it. I didn't create the consequences. I just made sure they couldn't be avoided. That evening, Ember called. She wanted to see Danny, and she wanted to discuss our situation without the pressure of attorneys and legal documents. I agreed to let her take Danny to dinner, but I insisted on choosing the restaurant. I selected Romano's, a family restaurant in the center of town where we were guaranteed to encounter people we knew. If Ember wanted to have a conversation about our situation, she could have it in front of the community that was judging her choices. They left at 6, and I spent the evening reviewing financial documents and planning the next phase of our divorce proceedings. Laura had recommended a forensic accountant who specialized in cases involving corporate misconduct, and I wanted to ensure that every asset was properly documented and divided. Around 8:30, my phone rang. It was Danny calling from the restaurant. "Dad, can you come pick me up? Mom's having some kind of breakdown." I drove to Romano's and found Danny waiting in the parking lot. Through the restaurant's windows, I could see Ember sitting alone at a table, crying into her hands, while other diners stared and whispered. "What happened?" "We ran into Mrs. Peterson and some of the other school moms. They were not friendly. Mom started crying and saying that everyone was being unfair to her. Then she started talking about how you and Laura had conspired to ruin her life." I looked through the window at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt a mixture of satisfaction and pity. She looked small and defeated. Nothing like the confident woman who'd walked out of our marriage 3 months ago. Get in the car, Danny. Your mother needs to figure this out on her own. As we drove home, Danny was quiet, processing what he'd witnessed. Finally, he spoke. Dad, I think I understand the difference between consequences and cruelty now. What's the difference? Consequences happen because of what you do. Cruelty happens because of who you are. And what do you think I am? I think you're someone who got tired of being lied to, but I also think you're enjoying this more than you should. He was right, of course. I was enjoying Ember's downfall more than was probably healthy, but I was also ensuring that Danny learned valuable lessons about integrity, accountability, and the importance of choosing your actions carefully. The social inferno was consuming everything Ember had built outside our marriage. Tomorrow, we would begin dismantling what remained inside it. The opportunity had become a reckoning that extended far beyond our family, and I was discovering that I had a talent for orchestrating reckonings. Friday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was reviewing quarterly reports when the doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Victor Gresham standing on my porch. He looked like a man who'd aged 5 years in 5 days, unshaven, wearing a wrinkled shirt, with the kind of desperate energy that comes from watching your entire life collapse in real time. We need to talk, he said without preamble. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. Danny was inside getting ready for school, and I didn't want him exposed to whatever Victor had planned. About what? About calling off your wife and Laura. This has gone far enough. I almost laughed. Victor Gresham, former CEO, reduced to begging on my front porch. I'm not sure what you think I can control, Victor. Laura's making her own decisions and Ember's facing the consequences of her own choices. Don't play innocent. You orchestrated this whole thing. I documented what you and my wife did. The consequences were already built into your choices. I just made sure they couldn't be ignored. Victor stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. It wasn't even 9 in the morning. You have no idea what you've done. I've lost everything. My job, my marriage, my reputation. You lost those things when you decided to have an affair with a subordinate using company resources. I just made sure the loss was official. I can destroy you, he said, his voice rising. I have connections, resources. You had connections and resources. Now you have a criminal investigation and a very angry ex-wife with excellent attorneys. The front door opened, and Danny emerged with his backpack. He took one look at Victor and understood the situation immediately. Morning, Mr. Gresham, he said politely. Rough week? Victor stared at my son with something approaching hatred. You raised him to be just like you. I raised him to value honesty and accountability. If that makes him like me, I consider it a compliment. After Victor left, I drove Danny to school and spent the morning at my office, catching up on actual work. The divorce proceedings were consuming more time than I'd anticipated, but my job still required attention. Jules stopped by around lunch with news from his media contact. The Business Journal wants to do a follow-up story about corporate accountability and the Gresham Industries situation. They're particularly interested in the role of family members in exposing corporate misconduct. Family members? Spouses who discover evidence of policy violations and report them to appropriate authorities. You and Laura are being positioned as civic-minded citizens who put ethics above personal loyalty. I considered this development. Being portrayed as a whistleblower rather than a vengeful husband would be helpful for the divorce proceedings and my professional reputation. What do they need from me? An interview about your decision to report Ember's relationship with Victor. They want to focus on the civic responsibility angle rather than the personal drama. Set it up. That afternoon, I met with reporter Jennifer Walsh. Not the prosecutor, but a different Jennifer Walsh who wrote for the Business Journal. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in corporate accountability stories. We met at a coffee shop downtown, away from my office and the potential gossip of colleagues. Jennifer had done her research. She knew the timeline of events, the corporate policies involved, and the legal implications of Victor and Ember's relationship. "What made you decide to report the policy violations rather than just filing for divorce?" she asked. "I believe in accountability. When people in positions of authority violate policies designed to protect employees and shareholders, those violations should have consequences. Some people might say you were motivated by revenge rather than civic duty. Some people would be partially right. I was angry about the affair, but I was also concerned about the misuse of corporate resources and the potential liability created by a supervisor-subordinate relationship." "Did you coordinate with Laura Gresham?" "Laura and I both discovered evidence of policy violations around the same time. We shared information and ensured that the appropriate authorities were notified." "What do you hope comes out of this situation?" "I hope it sends a message that corporate policies exist for good reasons and that violations will have consequences, regardless of who commits them." The interview lasted an hour, and I felt confident that the resulting article would portray me as a principled citizen rather than a vengeful spouse. The narrative was important, not just for my reputation, but for Danny's understanding of his father's choices. That evening, Danny and I were reviewing his homework when Ember called. She wanted to meet to discuss custody arrangements and property division. She suggested a neutral location, the coffee shop where I'd had my interview. "She's planning something," Danny observed. "Mom doesn't suggest neutral locations unless she's trying to control the situation." "What do you think she's planning?" "Probably trying to make you look like the bad guy in public, get people to witness you being unreasonable or cruel." My son's strategic thinking continued to impress me. "What would you do?" "Agree to meet her, but bring backup. Maybe Mr. Chen or someone who can witness whatever she's planning." I called Michael Chen, Laura's attorney, and explained the situation. He agreed to accompany me to the meeting, both as legal counsel and as a witness to whatever Ember had planned. We met Ember at the coffee shop the next morning. She'd chosen a table in the center of the room where our conversation would be visible to other customers. She was wearing a conservative dress and minimal makeup, trying to project an image of the wronged wife rather than the unfaithful spouse. "Darren, thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice carrying just enough emotion to attract attention from nearby tables. "Ember, this is Michael Chen, my attorney. I thought it would be appropriate to have legal counsel present." Her expression flickered with annoyance, but she recovered quickly. "Of course, I just hoped we could discuss this as adults, for Danny's sake. Everything we do should be for Danny's sake. That's why I've been documenting your choices so carefully." She leaned forward, lowering her voice but maintaining the appearance of reasonable discussion. "You're destroying my life, Darren. I made a mistake, but you're making sure I lose everything." "I'm making sure your choices have appropriate consequences. There's a difference." "What do you want? Money? Complete custody? My complete humiliation?" Michael Chen spoke for the first time. "Mrs. Carrow, your husband has been very reasonable in his demands. Primary custody with generous visitation rights, equitable property division, and reasonable spousal support during your transition period." "Transition to what?" "No one in this city will hire me now. You've made sure of that." "Your professional reputation is the result of your professional choices," I replied. "I didn't make you have an affair with your boss using company resources." Several customers were now openly listening to our conversation, which I suspected was exactly what Ember had planned. She was trying to make me look unreasonable in front of witnesses. "I'm willing to make concessions," she said, pulling out a document. "I've prepared a counter-proposal for the custody arrangement." I reviewed the document quickly. Ember was proposing joint custody with alternating weeks, no spousal support, and a property division that heavily favored her. It was either delusional or designed to make me angry enough to cause a scene. "This is unacceptable," I said calmly. "Why? Because you want to punish me?" Because you've demonstrated that you're not capable of putting Danny's needs ahead of your own desires. The affair, the lies, the attempt to change his emergency contacts without permission, all of that suggests that you view our son as a possession rather than a person. That's not true. Her voice rose enough to draw more attention, which confirmed my suspicion that this was all performance. Ember was trying to create a scene that would make me look like the unreasonable party. Mrs. Carrow, Michael Chen interjected, perhaps we should continue this discussion in my office, where we can review the proposals more thoroughly. No, Ember said firmly. I want to settle this now, as a family. We're not a family anymore, I said quietly. You ended that when you chose Victor over Danny and me. I chose excitement over boredom, passion over routine, success over mediocrity. The coffee shop had gone quiet, and every customer was now listening to our conversation. Ember had finally revealed her true feelings, and they were exactly as ugly as I'd suspected. Thank you for clarifying your priorities, I said, standing up. Michael, I think we have everything we need. As we left, I could hear the whispered conversations starting behind us. Ember had succeeded in creating a public scene, but not the one she'd intended. Instead of making me look unreasonable, she'd revealed herself to be exactly the kind of person who would abandon her family for excitement and success. Outside, Michael Chen shook his head. In 30 years of family law, I've never seen someone destroy their own case so thoroughly. She's not thinking strategically anymore. She's just reacting. That makes her dangerous. Desperate people make unpredictable choices. He was right, of course. Ember was losing control of the narrative, her reputation, and her future. That made her capable of almost anything. The opportunity had evolved into something larger than revenge or justice. It had become a comprehensive reckoning that was reshaping multiple lives and revealing the true character of everyone involved. And we were approaching the final act. Sunday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. The divorce papers had been filed, the custody arrangement was pending approval, and Ember's professional reputation lay in ruins. But I knew my wife well enough to recognize that she wasn't finished fighting. Desperate people don't surrender quietly. They escalate. I was proven right at 11 a.m. when Danny's phone started buzzing with notifications from his friends. Ember had posted a lengthy statement on Facebook, Instagram, and every other social media platform she could access. The post was a masterpiece of manipulation, painting herself as the victim of a vindictive husband and a conspiracy designed to destroy her life. Dad, you need to see this, Danny said, showing me his phone. Ember's post read like a carefully crafted victim narrative. I made a mistake that ended my marriage, and I take full responsibility for that. But what's happening to me now isn't justice. It's cruelty. My husband has orchestrated a campaign to destroy not just our marriage, but my career, my reputation, and my relationship with my son. He's turned our community against me, manipulated legal proceedings, and enlisted powerful allies to ensure that I lose everything. I'm sharing this not for sympathy, but to warn other women about what can happen when you cross a man who values control more than forgiveness. The post had already been shared dozens of times and was generating hundreds of comments. Some were supportive of Ember, but most were critical, pointing out that she was trying to avoid accountability for her choices. She's trying to flip the script, I observed. It's not working, Danny replied, scrolling through the comments. People remember what she did, and Mrs. Gresham posted a response. Laura's response was brief and devastating. Some people confuse consequences with cruelty. The difference is that consequences are earned. But Ember's social media campaign was just the opening move. At 2 p.m., she appeared at our front door with a moving truck and two men I didn't recognize. She was wearing designer clothes and expensive jewelry, probably purchased during her affair, and carrying a legal document. I'm here to collect my belongings, she announced, waving the paper. This is a court order authorizing me to retrieve my personal property. I examined the document carefully. It was legitimate, signed by a judge, and specifying that Ember could remove clothing, personal items, and furniture that belonged to her before the marriage. What it didn't authorize was the wholesale looting she appeared to be planning. The order covers personal belongings, I said, not marital property. Everything in that house is mine. I decorated it, I furnished it, I made it a home. With money from our joint accounts, which makes it marital property subject to division proceedings. Danny emerged from the house, laptop in hand. He'd been monitoring the situation from his room and had apparently prepared for this confrontation. "Mom, I printed out the receipts for everything you're trying to take," he said, handing her a stack of papers. "Almost all of it was purchased with Dad's credit card or money from joint accounts. The only things that are actually yours are the clothes you brought to the marriage and the jewelry Dad gave you for anniversaries." Ember stared at the receipts with growing fury. Our son had outmaneuvered her again, using documentation and logic to counter her emotional manipulation. "You turned my own child against me," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "I taught our child to value honesty and evidence over manipulation and lies," I corrected. "If that turned him against you, perhaps you should examine your behavior rather than blaming mine." The confrontation was attracting attention from neighbors who were gathering on their porches and lawns to watch the drama unfold. Tom and Sarah Bradley stood in their driveway, along with Margaret Peterson and several other families from our street. The entire neighborhood was witnessing Ember's final performance. "This isn't over," Ember said, signaling to the moving men. "I'll take what's rightfully mine." "Take what the court order authorizes," I replied. "Everything else stays until the property division is finalized." The next hour was a carefully choreographed battle over every item Ember tried to remove from the house. She attempted to claim the dining room set, the living room furniture, the television, and even Danny's gaming console. Each time, Danny produced receipts and documentation, proving that the items had been purchased with marital funds. The neighbors watched this spectacle with growing amazement. Ember was systematically destroying any remaining sympathy for her situation by trying to steal property that clearly belonged to our family. Finally, she gave up on the furniture and focused on smaller items: kitchen appliances, decorative objects, books, and artwork. But even here, Danny's documentation proved problematic. Almost everything had been purchased during our marriage, making it subject to legal division rather than unilateral seizure. "Fine," Ember said finally, her voice carrying across the neighborhood. "Keep your precious belongings, but don't think this ends here. I have options you haven't considered." After she left, the neighbors gradually dispersed, but several stopped to offer support and express amazement at Danny's organizational skills. Margaret Peterson summed up the general sentiment. "That boy has more sense than his mother ever did." That evening, Danny and I ordered pizza and discussed the day's events. The attempted moving truck raid had backfired spectacularly, further damaging Ember's reputation and strengthening our position in the divorce proceedings. "What do you think she meant about having options we haven't considered?" Danny asked. "I think she's desperate enough to try something stupid. We should be prepared for anything." I was proven right the next morning when Michael Chen called with urgent news. Ember had filed a countersuit alleging that I had engaged in malicious interference with her employment and had conspired with Laura Gresham to destroy her career through false allegations. "Can she do that?" I asked. "She can file it, but she can't win it. Everything we did was legal and justified, but it means more legal fees and more time in court." "What's her endgame?" "Probably hoping to force a settlement by making the legal process so expensive and time-consuming that you'll agree to her terms just to end it." "That's not happening." "I didn't think it would be, but Darren, you should know that she's also filed for an emergency custody hearing, claiming that you've been alienating Danny against her and creating an unsafe, emotional environment." That afternoon, I sat down with Danny to discuss the custody hearing. At 14, He was old enough to express his preferences to the court, and his testimony would be crucial. "Are you prepared to tell a judge why you want to live with me?" I asked. "I want to live with the parent who tells me the truth," he said simply. "Mom's been lying to both of us for months. I can't trust someone who lies that easily. The judge will ask about my behavior too. You need to be honest about everything, even if it makes me look bad." "You mean like how you've been enjoying Mom's downfall more than you probably should?" "Exactly like that. I'll tell the truth, Dad. About everything. About her lies. About your planning. About how this whole situation happened. The judge can decide what's best based on facts instead of manipulation." The custody hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. In the meantime, Ember's social media campaign continued, growing more desperate and less coherent with each post. She was alienating the few supporters she had left by making increasingly wild accusations about conspiracies and persecution. Laura called Wednesday evening with an update on Victor's situation. "He's been arrested for embezzlement. The district attorney found evidence that he'd been using company funds for personal expenses beyond just the affair. Apparently, your wife was just the latest in a long line of expensive mistakes." What does that mean for Ember? It means she was involved with a man who was stealing from his own company. That's not going to help her custody case or her reputation. Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow would determine Danny's future and finalize the end of my marriage. I walked through our house looking at 15 years of shared memories and accumulated possessions, trying to remember when everything had started going wrong. In Danny's room, I found him still awake, reading on his laptop. "Nervous about tomorrow?" I asked. "Not nervous. Ready. I've been practicing what I want to say to the judge." "What's that?" "That I want to live with the parent who taught me that actions have consequences, even when those consequences are painful. And that I want to visit the parent who made mistakes because I love her, but I don't want to live with someone who can't take responsibility for their choices." Friday morning arrived crisp and clear. Danny wore his best clothes and I wore my most conservative suit. We drove to the courthouse together, father and son, prepared to face whatever Ember had planned for her final performance. In the courthouse hallway, we encountered Ember with her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman who specialized in contentious custody cases. Ember looked exhausted, defeated, but still dangerous in the way that cornered animals are dangerous. "Last chance to settle this reasonably," her attorney said to Michael Chen. "Our terms haven't changed," Michael replied. "Primary custody with generous visitation, equitable property division, reasonable support during transition. My client wants joint custody and equal division of all assets. Your client forfeited her right to equal treatment when she chose adultery over family." The hearing lasted 3 hours. Ember testified first, painting herself as a reformed woman who had made one mistake and was being punished disproportionately. She claimed that I had manipulated Danny against her and had orchestrated a campaign of harassment designed to destroy her life. I testified second, presenting evidence of Ember's lies, her affair, her misuse of company resources, and her attempts to manipulate the custody process. I acknowledged that I had been strategic in documenting her choices, but maintained that everything I had done was legal and justified. Danny testified last. At 14, he was poised and articulate, answering every question with the kind of honesty that cut through legal maneuvering and emotional manipulation. "Why do you want to live with your father?" the judge asked. "Because he's taught me that honesty matters more than convenience, and that choices have consequences, even when those consequences are painful. I love my mother, but I can't trust someone who lies as easily as she does." "Do you believe your father has turned you against your mother?" "No, Your Honor. My father documented what my mother did and made sure the appropriate people knew about it. My mother's choices turned me against her behavior, not my father's reaction to those choices." The judge deliberated for an hour before rendering his decision. Primary custody to me, with supervised visitation for Ember until she completed counseling and demonstrated stability. property division according to our original proposal. The marriage was officially dissolved. Outside the courthouse, Ember made one final attempt at manipulation. "You've won," she said. "Are you happy now?" "I'm not happy," I replied, "but I'm free, and so are you." "Free to do what? You've destroyed my career, my reputation, my relationship with my son. You destroyed those things with your choices. I just made sure the destruction was complete and public. I hope it was worth it." I looked at Danny, standing beside me in his best clothes, ready to face whatever came next with honesty and integrity. It was. That evening, Danny and I sat on our back porch, watching the sun set over our neighborhood. The houses around us were filled with families living their normal lives, but our family had been forever changed by the events of the past months. "Do you think Mom will ever understand what she did wrong?" Danny asked. "I think your mother will eventually understand that choices have consequences. Whether she learns to make better choices is up to her." "And what about us?" "We're going to build a life based on honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. We're going to remember that actions matter more than words, and that integrity is more valuable than convenience." "Sounds good to me." The opportunity had become something larger than revenge or justice. It had become a comprehensive lesson in accountability, consequences, and the importance of choosing your actions carefully. Ember and Victor had lost everything because they had chosen excitement over integrity, convenience over honesty, and immediate gratification over long-term consequences. Danny and I had gained something more valuable than victory. We had gained the knowledge that we could face crisis with dignity, handle betrayal with strategic thinking, and emerge from chaos with our principles intact. The reckoning was complete, but the lessons would last a lifetime.